Hello my young friends and welcome to Study with Sudhir, your digital classroom. I hope you are doing well. This is a video which is going to be very important for you because we are going to be talking about the time management that you need to do in your English 2, that is the English literature examination. Now why this is important? Unlike many other subject papers, this is one paper where you would actually find yourself hard pressed for time. In many other subjects, maths, geography, sometimes even if you are really very good in physics and chemistry also, you have the time available to you to attempt an extra question. That won't be the case as far as the English literature exam is concerned, because you need to attempt 5 and you will be given a choice of 9 questions. So in terms of choice, you are spoiled for choice, though I'm sure many of you may not quite agree. But to do those 5 questions, which has lots of sub questions, needs efficient time management. And I want to stress on this because despite actually putting it out in many videos about the kind of order that you need to maintain, about the kind of time management that you need to do, many students wrote to me that they had missed out on either the summary writing because they had left it to the last. I had said it should be done in the middle part. Many students did not do the essay properly, did not use the 15 minutes efficiently enough to decide which essay they want to do. One student, and I felt really bad, he said that he started doing the C option as far as the composition was concerned, realized midway that that was not working out or that was not what was asked. He cut it out and then started doing D, and obviously in that whole hurry-burry did not quite do a good job. So let's avoid. Now if you have done part 1 very well, this is your time to ensure that you do part 2 also well, so that your English marks, which is compulsory when you calculate the best of 5, is really very good. If you have not done part 1 very well, this is your time and chance and opportunity to make amends. Okay, so as I said, you need to attempt 1 question from Merchant of Venice, 1 question from Treasure Trove poems, and 1 question from Treasure Trove stories, right? So 1 from each section is compulsory, and then you can attempt the 4th and the 5th question from any of the 3, and that means you could actually attempt 2 from poems or 2 from stories or 2 from Merchant of Venice. So you could have a 3 + 1 + 1 kind of a combination, or as you please, you could have a 2 + 2 + 1 combination. We have explained that in detail in an earlier video, so please do go have a look at it. Do not get confused by that instruction on top of the question paper. It does not mean that you cannot attempt 3 questions from 1 section. Okay, now let's come to the first 15 minutes, and this is going to be extremely crucial as far as the English literature paper is concerned. During those 15 minutes, correctly determine which Merchant of Venice passage extract you are going to attempt. You need to obviously identify which act, which scene it has been taken from. Now here you need to be very careful because many of Shylock's lines in particular may actually confuse you, because all along the play he has had this sense of animosity and hatred for Antonio. So you could actually get confused between what he's saying in the trial scene, which is Act 4 Scene 1, or in the introduction scene, which is Act 1 Scene 3, or anywhere in between in Act 3. So please do not get confused about Shylock's lines. Also do not get confused about, say, a Gratiano. Gratiano also has a sense of taunting Shylock through the play. So you have to be very, very careful about identifying where, which act and which scene that particular character is saying those lines. So you need to use those 15 minutes to correctly identify which extract you would want to attempt, depending on whether you have been able to identify the extract correctly, and also determine whether you will be able to answer all the questions asked in that particular extract. So please be very, very careful. Then decide on the poem and the story. Now do not jump into a poem or a story just because you like the poem or you have prepared it well. Please read the questions very, very carefully, because sometimes there is a tricky question, sometimes there is a googly, and you may get stumped in just 1 question out of the 4 or 5 which have been asked. So you need to be very, very careful about which poem or story you are going to attempt. Now which part you do well, now that comes the second part. When the clock strikes 11, which is the question. Now, assuming that you know all the 5, okay, it is quite often possible that you may know 3 of them really well, 2 of them not so well, but fairly well, okay, but there will be obviously a sense of degree of comparison. Now, always go with the one that you are best prepared with. It does not matter whether it is from the Treasure Trove poems or stories or Merchant of Venice or Mousetrap, as the case may be. Just go with whichever you are best prepared with. You can start with the poem, say for instance, The Cold Within has come, and you think you're very good with Cold Within. You start with The Cold Within. Then if you think you've got a story from, say, let's say Hearts and Hands, go with Hearts and Hands or A Horse with Horse and Two Goats. Then you can come to the extract. Just go with whichever you think you are best prepared with. That should be your idea, because the examiner in the first 6 pages, 7 pages that he or she is checking should feel that, this student is good. That first impression has to be your best impression. So that has to be your strategy. Now it is possible that you have decided to attempt 3 poems. Let's just take an example, and you know them very well. Feel free to do all of them in one go. No problem at all. The examiner is not going to think that, okay, though I personally would prefer a 2 plus 2 plus 1 kind of formula, but 3 plus 1 plus 1 is perfectly all right if you think you are able to do justice to it and you are able to do them well, and that can actually secure your 100 on 100, which is actually possible. Now, it's not necessary that you have to do 1 each and then come back to do the 4th and the 5th question. That's not compulsory. As far as time division goes, 120 minutes divided by 5 is about 24 minutes, right? Now, but you obviously need to leave some time for revision, because it's quite possible that when you're writing fast, you could make some spelling mistakes, or some of your words are not very legible, or you could make some kind of a grammatical error. You need to keep that extra buffer of 10 minutes, both as a buffer and also as time for checking and revision of your answers. So let's look at it as 110 divided by 5. So that essentially means roughly about 22 minutes for each question. For each extract, you need to devote 22 minutes of your time. That has to be your kind of time management. Please do not mess up on time management. Many students actually do that they do the first 4 questions very well and mess up on the 5th answer. So all the hard work that you have put in, all the good work that you have done in the first 4 questions comes to naught if you mess up the 5th question. What's the point of getting a 15, 15, 15, 15, 60 marks and then getting a 10 in the last, right? So I would much rather prefer that you do the first, all the 5 equally, stick to the time. Very, very important, which is why the 15 minutes before becomes extremely crucial in order to determine what has to be your examination paper strategy. Understood? Now, there are usually 4 to sometimes 5 questions within a particular poem or story or extract from Merchant of Venice. Now, mark the 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D very, very clearly. Many of you have made the mistake of not doing so. One student wrote to me saying that they have missed out on marking in, I think in the transformation of sentences, not marked the 8 one by one. They have written it in order, but they have not marked the 1, 2, 3, 4. Do not make those kind of mistakes. The 2A, 2B should be ideally in a font size bigger than your normal answer handwriting size. Now, answer the address the question straight away. That has to be point number 6. Address the question straight away. Don't beat about the bush. This is extremely significant. You would lose marks if your keywords etc. are coming right at the end and not at the beginning, right? We will do a question about my specific tips about the examination. That video will be separately done, but ensure that you are not beating about the bush and not coming to the point straight. That has to be very, very important. If the first question says, what did Mr. Oliver see while he was walking through the pine forest? You need to come to the point straight. You don't need to write about Mr. Oliver was coming through the pine forest after having spent some time in the Shimla Mall and this thing. Come to the point straight. Okay. The other thing is that the only intro that has to be woven into the sentence is to say identify the act and scene number. That has to be woven, that this act and scene is from the trial scene, which is Act 4 Scene 1 in Merchant of Venice by William Shakespeare. That's all. That can be woven into it. I'm not asking you to make a separate sentence. You can weave it into the first 2 sentences. That's perfectly all right. You need to know all the names of the poets and the authors and which poem or story they have written. Do not get mixed up and write R.K. Narayan wrote A Face in the Dark. Please do not make such mistakes. The examiner is not going to be impressed or amused if you make those kind of silly mistakes. So you need to know which author, which poet, which poem, which story. Very, very important. Do not make a mistake in that. And you always ensure that in the poem, in the answer, write the poet's name or the author's name, weave it into that. Just don't write the author or the writer or the poet. Don't do that. This thing, even for Shakespeare, you can use words like the dramatist, you know, the celebrated playwright, you know, use different kind of synonyms. Don't keep just writing Shakespeare all the time. So these are the tips as far as the time management for your English literature examination is concerned. I hope you will make note of this, put it to practice so that you do not make, if any of you have made any mistakes as far as the English 1 paper is concerned, you do not make the mistakes as far as the English 2 paper is concerned, because remember, the English marks are compulsorily added to your best of 5 when you seek admission to class 11, wherever, in whichever city or state that you are in. Thank you very much for watching. All the best.